The billionaire went to his ex-wife's home with divorce papers and met his newborn child. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from, and when the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Oh, and make sure you follow our channel for more shocking stories like this. Now, sit back and enjoy every detail. The cold, relentless rain hammered against the taxi windows as Julian Vance watched the familiar streets of Notting Hill slide past his eyes. 4 years. 4 long years since he had last set foot in London. And now, every corner brought back memories he'd buried under mountains of work and financial success. His phone buzzed with another call from New York. He ignored it. For the first time in years, business could wait. "Here is fine," he murmured to the taxi driver, recognizing the familiar outline of the elegant period building. His hands, accustomed to signing multi-million-pound contracts, trembled slightly as he paid the fare. Julian paused in front of the pale stone building where he'd lived the best years of his life. The same third-floor balcony. The same terracotta pots filled with red geraniums. It was as if time had stopped the moment he walked out. He vividly recalled that dawn 4 years ago. The half-packed suitcase. The letter he'd scribbled with shaking hands. Ellie's tearful eyes asking, "Why are you leaving like this, Julian? What did I do wrong?" He hadn't been able to tell her then that it wasn't about her. That the political and financial scandal threatening to drown him forced him to disappear, to rebuild himself from scratch in a foreign land. That staying meant dragging her down to ruin with him. But he had been a coward. He knew it now. His Italian shoes echoed on the marble staircase. Each step was a louder beat of his heart. Did she still live here? Had she moved on? Had she ever forgiven him? He stopped before door 3B, the same brass plaque with Vance engraved in delicate script. His fingers brushed the doorbell, but before he could press it, he heard something that made his skin wriggle. A crystalline, childish laugh coming from inside. He rang the bell. Footsteps approached, and when the door opened, an older woman in her 60s, presumably a nanny, looked at him strangely. "Yes? Can I help you?" Before he could answer, a tiny figure slipped between the woman's legs and ran straight toward him. A little girl with wavy brown hair, possessing the most intense green eyes he had ever seen, except for his own reflection every morning. "Hello, are you here to see Mummy?" the little one asked, with a smile that pierced his soul. Julian was paralyzed. The child had the same distinctive eyebrows as him, the same nose shape, the same dimple on her chin he'd inherited from his grandfather. "Charlie, come back here, darling," the older woman, Maria, said, clearly the nanny. "Excuse me, sir, but—" "It's okay, Maria." The voice came from the end of the hallway, and Julian felt all the air leave his lungs. Eleanor appeared, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing the same paint-splattered t-shirt he remembered from her creative afternoons. She was just as beautiful, but there was something different in her eyes, a depth, a strength he didn't recall. When she saw him, the towel slipped from her hands. "Julian." "Hello, Ellie." His voice came out rougher than intended. The little girl, Charlie, was still next to him, observing the tension between the adults with childish curiosity. "Mummy, is this man your friend?" Eleanor took a deep breath, her gaze alternating between Julian and the child. Then she approached and lifted the girl into her arms, as if shielding her from something invisible. "Charlie, go with Maria to get your snack, okay? But I want to stay with the handsome man." The little one protested, and Julian felt his heart breaking. When they were alone in the entrance hall, the silence was deafening. "She's 3 years and 3 months old," Ellie said, without him having to ask. Her voice was barely a whisper. Julian did the math. Back 4 years. He remembered their last night together before he left. The desperate passion, the whispered promises, the love he believed was eternal. "Why did you never tell me you were pregnant?" Ellie looked at him with a mixture of pain and rage that stole his breath. When, Julian? When could I have told you? When you changed your number? When you moved without leaving an address? Or when your assistants hung up on me every time I tried to contact you? Interactive question in CTA. Would Julian have been able to stay if he had known about his daughter? Or would he have run even further away? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Julian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Ellie remembered perfectly from his stress days. 4 years hadn't erased that habit. I tried to contact you, he murmured, avoiding her gaze. At first? Ellie let out a bitter laugh. Julian, you disappeared as if we had never existed, as if 3 years of marriage were just a fleeting whim. It wasn't a whim. His voice hardened. You were never a whim to me. Then what were we? What was I? The tears she had held back for years threatened to overflow. Because I don't understand how someone who supposedly loves you can leave like that, without explanation. Julian took a step closer, but she instinctively retreated. Ellie, there were things you couldn't know. The scandal with the energy minister, the threats, the judicial investigation. And it never occurred to you to trust your wife? To tell me everything and face it together? They would have dragged you down with me, he exploded. And for the first time, he showed the vulnerability hidden behind his facade as a successful magnate. Don't you get it? The journalists, the courts, the debts? I wasn't going to allow you to be ruined by my mistakes. Ellie fell silent, processing the words she'd waited 4 years to hear. So you decided for both of us, she whispered, without asking me what I wanted. I was protecting you. You were being a coward. The word hung between them like a slap. Julian clenched his fists but didn't deny it. From the kitchen came Charlie's laughter, playing with Maria, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the hall. That laughter sounded exactly like Julian's, when something truly amused him. Do you know how long I waited for a call from you? Ellie sat on the small bench by the entrance, suddenly exhausted. 3 months. 3 months thinking you'd had an accident. That something terrible had happened, until I saw your name in the Financial Times posing next to American investors. Julian closed his eyes tightly. That's when I knew you weren't dead, just dead to me. Ellie, do you know what the worst part was? Not the public humiliation when the papers started speculating about our broken marriage. Not the pitying looks from the neighbors. It was realizing I was pregnant, and not having the person I loved most to share that news with. Ellie's words cut through him like knives. Julian leaned against the wall, visibly affected. I was scared, he finally admitted. Scared that you would see me fail. Scared that you would leave me when you discovered the magnitude of my problems. Then you left me first. Yes. The confession came out as a broken sigh. Maria appeared at this kitchen entrance with Charlie by the hand. The little one had managed to smear chocolate on her cheeks and was smiling with that innocence only children possess. Excuse me, Mrs. Hayes, Maria said delicately, but Charlie asks if the gentleman is staying for dinner. Charlie slipped out of Maria's hand and ran to Julian, raising her little arms. Are you staying? Mummy makes the best pasta. Julian looked at Ellie, seeking permission. She avoided his gaze for what felt like an eternity, fighting against all the contradictory emotions surging in her chest. An hour, she finally said. Charlie eats dinner at 7:30. Really? Charlie clapped her hands, delighted. Julian crouched down to the girl's level. How about you tell me what you've been doing these days? As Charlie began talking animatedly about her drawings and dolls, Ellie watched the ease with which her daughter had accepted this stranger, who had her same eyes. She didn't know if that reassured her or terrified her. Because if Charlie grew fond of Julian, and he disappeared again, this time it wouldn't just be her heart that broke. It would be her daughter's heart, too. The kitchen was filled with the aroma of garlic and basil when Julian followed Charlie into the small dining area. Everything had changed, and yet nothing had changed. The same white linen curtains he had helped hang, but now there were children's drawings taped to the fridge with colorful magnets. "Look, this is me and Mummy in the park," Charlie announced, pointing to a scribble of two figures under what looked like a giant tree. "And this is Patches." "Patches? My cat. Well, he was my cat. He went to heaven last month." Her expression saddened for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Do you have pets?" Julian felt a pang of guilt. He knew nothing about his daughter's life, her tastes, her fears, her everyday joys. "No, but I really like animals." "Me too. Mummy says when we're bigger we can get a big dog." Ellie appeared carrying a platter of pasta that filled the table with aromatic steam. She had changed her paint-stained t-shirt for a navy blue sweater that enhanced the color of her dark eyes. "Charlie, wash your hands before dinner." While the girl ran to the bathroom, Ellie and Julian were left alone in tense silence. He watched her serve the pasta with precise, efficient movements. There was something different about the way she moved. More confident, more independent. "How did you do it?" he asked quietly. "The first few months, pregnant and alone." Ellie didn't look up from the plate she was serving. "At first I thought about looking for you. I even hired a private investigator." Her voice was neutral, as if talking about the weather. "But when I finally tracked you down in New York and saw the photos of your business dinners with that blonde from Forbes magazine..." "Victoria Sterling is just an investment partner," Julian hurried to clarify. "You don't owe me explanations, Julian." By then, I had already made my decision. Ellie finally looked at him. "I decided my daughter deserved a father who wanted to be present, not one who had to be begged to come back." The words were like a punch to the stomach. "But I never stopped loving you." "Really?" Ellie put the spoon down on the table harder than necessary. "Because running away without explanation isn't exactly the definition of love I go by." Charlie came running back, oblivious to the tension, and climbed onto her chair with Julian's help. For the next few minutes, the conversation focused on safe topics. Charlie's school, her drawings, her friends. "And what do you do now?" Julian asked, while Charlie concentrated on twirling her spaghetti. "I'm still doing graphic design. I work mainly with small local businesses, and on weekends I teach art classes to children at the community center." Julian noted the pride in her voice, but also something she wasn't saying. He knew Ellie well enough to recognize when she omitted information. It must be tight financially. The look she gave him was glacial. "I don't need your pity or your money, Julian. We manage perfectly well." "It's not pity. It's responsibility. Charlie is my daughter." "Charlie is my daughter," she corrected firmly. "You're a stranger who showed up on our doorstep today." The ensuing silence was broken by Charlie's little voice. "Why are you arguing? Are you mad at Mr. Julian, Mummy?" Ellie took a deep breath, forcing a smile. "No, darling. Adults sometimes have complicated conversations. Like when Grandma argues with Grandpa about football, something like that." Julian watched the mother-daughter interaction with a mix of admiration and pain. Ellie had raised an intelligent, empathetic, and confident girl all by herself. She had done an extraordinary job, and he hadn't been there to see it. After dinner, while Ellie prepared Charlie for her bath, Julian wandered through the apartment. In Ellie's study, which used to be his office, he saw dozens of illustrations and designs. Her talent had flourished in his absence, but it was in Charlie's bedroom where he paused the longest. The walls were covered with her drawings, and on the bedside table was a photo of a radiant, heavily pregnant Ellie, her hand resting on her belly. A moment he had never seen. A moment he had never lived. When Ellie appeared at the door after putting Charlie to bed, her eyes also fell on the photograph. "I took it the day I reached 7 months. That day, I decided that no matter what, my daughter would know she was wanted and loved from the very beginning." Julian turned to her, and for the first time in years, he let his defenses completely down. "Forgive me, Ellie. Please, forgive me." But as he reached out for her, the doorbell rang. It was past 9 at night. Who could it be? Ellie walked toward the door with some unease. Late-night visitors were unusual in her ordered, predictable life. "Who is it?" she asked through the intercom. It's me. Julian saw her face tense. The name was familiar, but he couldn't place it until Ellie opened the door and a man in his mid-30s appeared. Tall, dark-haired, with a warm smile and a bouquet of flowers in his hands. Sorry to drop by, but I was passing and saw the lights on. Dr. Ethan Bell stopped short, noticing Julian's presence in the living room. His smile faded slightly. Oh, I didn't know you had company. Ethan, this is Julian. Julian, this is Dr. Ethan Bell. Ellie hesitated, searching for the appropriate words. Her fiancé, Ethan completed, extending his hand to Julian, with a mixture of courtesy and masculine territoriality. The world stopped for Julian. The word echoed in his head, like a distorted, extorted echo. Fiancé? Ellie was wearing a discreet ring on her right ring finger, not her left. That's why he hadn't noticed it. Charmed, Julian murmured, shaking Ethan's hand with more force than necessary. Ethan is a pediatrician at St. Thomas's Hospital, Ellie explained, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. And yes, we got engaged 3 months ago. A pediatrician? Julian felt as if every word was a direct hit to his self-esteem. A pediatrician. Someone dedicated to caring for children. Someone who would be perfect for Charlie. Charlie is already asleep, Ellie quickly added, addressing Ethan. She had a good dinner and did her homework. The familiarity with which Ethan nodded, as if he knew Charlie's routines perfectly, was devastating for Julian. This man had been present in Charlie's life in a way he had never had the opportunity to be. Perfect. Tomorrow is Saturday. We could take her to Regent's Park, as we promised. Ethan placed the flowers on the dining table and then noticed the dirty plates. Did you have dinner together? Julian came to resolve some pending matters, Ellie said, avoiding Sajto. Pending matters? Ethan looked at Julian more closely. I know you from somewhere. Your face looks familiar. Julian exchanged a glance with Ellie. She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. We're old acquaintances, Julian replied vaguely. Ethan, could you help me clear the kitchen? Ellie intervened, clearly trying to separate them. As they headed toward the kitchen, Julian was left alone in the living room, feeling like an intruder in what had once been his home. He overheard fragments of their conversation in whispers. You didn't mention that he just showed up. Should I be worried about something? It's complicated. Julian discreetly approached and saw through the half-open door how Ethan wrapped his arms around Ellie's waist with familiarity, how she leaned into the embrace. The image gave him a pang of jealousy so intense that he had to grip the back of the sofa. When they returned to the living room, Ethan had recovered his professional smile, but his eyes observed Julian with suspicion. Well, Julian, what do? Renewable energy. I have several companies in the States and Europe. Interesting. And have you been living abroad for a long time? 4 years. The answer hung in the air, loaded with meaning. Ethan looked at Ellie, then at Julian, and Julian could see the exact moment the pieces began to click in his rival's mind. 4 years, Ethan repeated slowly, the same age as Charlie. The silence became suffocating. I think you should go, Ellie said to Julian, her voice trembling. It's late. Julian nodded, aware that he had just detonated a bomb in the apparently perfect life Ellie had built. As he headed toward the door, Ethan stopped him with a question that chilled him. Julian, what did you say your last name was? Julian turned slowly. Lies would no longer serve any purpose. Vance. Julian Vance watched Ethan turn pale. As Charlie's pediatrician, he had access to her medical history. He knew perfectly well what the girl's full last name was. Charlotte Hayes Vance. He had just realized he was engaged to the ex-wife of the man standing before him. And worse, that the man he had just shaken hands with was the biological father of the child he practically considered his own adopted daughter. The air in the apartment became so thick that Julian felt it difficult to breathe. Ethan looked at him with an expression that had gone from confusion to comprehension. and then to something much more dangerous. A mixture of betrayal and contained fury. Charlotte Hayes Vance, Ethan murmured, as if saying the full name aloud helped him process the information. He turned to Ellie with eyes demanding an explanation. Is he Charlie's father? Ellie closed her eyes, defeated. Ethan, please, we can talk about this tomorrow when... Answer me. The pediatrician's voice was raised for the first time since Julian had met him. This man is the father of the child I play football with on Sundays. The child I read bedtime stories to. The child who calls me Uncle Ethan, and who asks me if I'll be her daddy someday. Every word was a slap for Julian. Ethan had been there for all the everyday moments he had missed. The first steps, the first words, the night terrors, the scraped knees. Yes, Ellie whispered. Julian is Charlie's biological father. The biological father? Ethan ran his hands through his hair, clearly trying to maintain his composure. And where has he been these 4 years while you what, exactly? Julian couldn't hold back any longer. While you played at being the perfect father to my daughter? Your daughter? Ethan stepped toward him, his fists clenched. Your daughter doesn't know you. Your daughter has never asked about you because to her, you don't exist. Stop it! Ellie intervened between the two men. This is exactly what I didn't want to happen. Do you know what hurts the most? Ethan continued, ignoring Ellie's warning. That during these 2 years we've been together, during all the nights we've talked about our future, about starting a family, you never mentioned that Charlie's father might come back. Because I never thought he would, Ellie replied, her voice breaking. Because Julian made it very clear 4 years ago that we weren't his priority. We? Julian asked, noticing the plural. Yes, we. Because when you left, Julian, I didn't know if I would be able to sustain the pregnancy. I had complications in the 5th month. Bleeding. Complete bed rest for weeks. Her eyes filled with tears. And I had no one. My parents were traveling. My friends were working. I was completely alone, terrified of losing my baby. Julian felt the air ripped from his lungs. I didn't know, he stammered. Of course you didn't know. You were too busy rebuilding your empire to worry about what you left behind. That's not fair. It's not fair. Ellie turned to him with a fury she hadn't shown all night. Do you know what's not fair? That you show up now, after 4 years, expecting everything to go back to how it was. Do you know what's not fair? That you jeopardize the stability I fought so hard to build for Charlie. I don't want to jeopardize anything. I just want to know my daughter. Your daughter already has a father figure. Ethan interjected, regaining his composure, but without concealing the bitterness in his voice. Someone who was here when she had a fever. Someone who comforted her when her cat died. Someone who helps her with her homework every night. Julian looked at him with a mixture of reluctant respect and absolute jealousy. Ethan was right, and that was what hurt the most. And tomorrow, Ethan continued, I was going to officially ask her to let me adopt her. We were going to be a real family. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the sound of the night traffic seemed to have stopped. What did you say? Julian's voice was a hoarse whisper. I said that tomorrow I was going to ask Charlie to let me be her official father. With papers. With my last name. Forever. Julian felt as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. Not only had he lost 4 years of his daughter's life, but he was about to lose her forever. To someone who had known how to love her when he wasn't there. Ellie, he murmured, with a desperation he didn't try to hide. Please. But when he turned to her, Ellie was no longer looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on Charlie's bedroom door, where a tiny figure in pink pajamas watched them from the shadows. How long had Charlie been awake? How much had she heard of this conversation that could change her world forever? Charlie, darling, what are you doing awake? Ellie quickly approached her daughter, trying to keep her voice calm, despite the panic that washed over her. The little one stepped fully out of the shadows, her green eyes huge in her pale face. She was clutching her favorite stuffed animal, a long-eared rabbit Julian didn't recognize. I couldn't sleep. I heard loud voices. Charlie looked at the three adults with that intuition only children have for detecting when something serious is happening. Why is everyone sad? We're not sad, sweetie, Ethan lied, approaching and trying to lift her up. We were just talking. But Charlie moved away slightly, something she had never done before, and stood next to her mother. Mummy, is Mr. Julian going to leave again? The question dropped like a bomb into the silence of the living room. Julian felt something break inside his chest. Again? Did that mean Charlie remembered something? Or did she simply have the intuition that he wasn't a permanent fixture in their lives? Charlie, why do you ask that? Ellie knelt to her daughter's height, stroking her hair tenderly. Because that's what daddies who don't live with us do. They leave. The little one hugged her rabbit tighter. Like Maria's dad in my class or Miguel's. Julian closed his eyes tightly. His daughter had categorized fathers into two groups, those who stay and those who leave, and by some childish instinct, she had already placed him in the second category. Sweetie, Ethan intervened gently. Remember we talked about there being different kinds of families? Yes, that some have mummy and daddy, some only mummy, some only daddy, and some have mummy and Uncle Ethan, who is almost like a daddy. Exactly, and that's not going to change, okay? But Charlie didn't seem convinced. Her gaze went straight to Julian, with that directness only children possess. Are you my real daddy? The world stopped. Julian looked at Ellie, seeking guidance, but she was as paralyzed as he was. Julian started, but the words caught in his throat. It's complicated, Charlie. Ellie finally intervened. It's not complicated, Charlie said, with that childish logic that is sometimes wiser than adults. You're either my daddy or you're not. Julian slowly approached and knelt in front of her, meeting her gaze. Yes, Charlie, I'm your daddy. Ethan let out a sharp exhale, as if he'd been punched. Then why didn't you live with us? Why? Because I made a very big mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. And now are you coming to live with us? Julian looked at Ellie, then at Ethan, then back at his daughter. He had no answer for that question. I don't know, little one, but do you want me to? The question was so direct, so honest, that Julian felt tears pricking his eyes for the first time in years. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I do. And what do you want, Mummy? Ellie was speechless. Her 3-year-old daughter had put her on the spot, with a question she hadn't dared to ask herself. I need time to think, darling. And you, Uncle Ethan, do you want Mr. Julian to live with us? Ethan closed his eyes, clearly wrestling with contradictory emotions. What I want is for you to be happy, Charlie. Always. But can we all be happy together? Like in the movies? The silence that followed was heartbreaking. The three adults realized that Charlie's innocence had exposed the impossibility of the situation. They couldn't all be happy together. Someone was going to get hurt. Sweetie, I think it's time for you to go back to bed, Ellie said softly. But are you going to keep talking in loud voices? No, I promise. Charlie nodded. But before leaving with her mother, she approached Julian. Will you give me a goodnight kiss? Uncle Ethan always gives me goodnight kisses. Julian felt his heart pound in his chest. He leaned in and gently kissed his daughter's forehead. Good night, Charlie. Good night, Daddy. When Ellie took Charlie back to her room, Julian and Ethan were left alone in a silence charged with tension. It's incredible, Ethan finally murmured. How a 3-year-old can make 2 grown men feel like complete idiots. Julian couldn't help a bitter smile. She has your pragmatism, he said, referring to Ellie. And apparently, she also inherited the ability to ask questions that have no easy answer. When Ellie returned, she found the 2 men sitting on opposite ends of the sofa, each lost in their own thoughts. She fell asleep immediately, she announced. But she asked me if she could call you Daddy tomorrow instead of Mr. Julian. Julian felt a mixture of joy and terror. His daughter had accepted him with the ease only children have, but that also meant he now had the responsibility not to let her down. The whole truth and the noble sacrifice. Julian hadn't slept a wink all night. From the windows of his five-star hotel in London's Knightsbridge, he had watched the sunrise over the city, but his thoughts were miles away, in a small Notting Hill apartment where his daughter would wake up expecting to see him. At 8:30, his phone rang. "Daddy, are you coming to have breakfast with me?" Charlie's voice on the other end melted him completely. Ellie must have given her the number. "Good morning, little one. How did you sleep?" "Good. I dreamed we went to the park and you taught me to fly a kite. Can you fly kites?" Julian smiled, despite the tension consuming him. "I can learn." "Perfect. Are you coming now?" "Charlie, give the phone back to Mummy." He heard Ellie's voice in the background. "Tell Mummy I'll be there in half an hour," Julian said, before the line disconnected. When he arrived at the apartment, it was Ethan who opened the door. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual smile had been replaced by an expression of resigned exhaustion. "Morning," he murmured. "Charlie is having breakfast." "Ethan, about last night." "Forget it." Ethan raised a hand, stopping him. "I've been thinking all night, and I realized something." "What?" "That I can't compete against a ghost. For 2 years I competed against the idealized image Ellie had of you, against the memory of the great love of her life. But now that you're here, in flesh and blood, with your flaws and your mistakes." Ethan paused. "Now I can compete on equal terms." Julian looked at him with renewed respect. Ethan was not just a good man, he was a strategist. "Daddy!" Charlie ran toward him with open arms, wearing an oversized pink glitter t-shirt. "Are we going to the park now?" "After breakfast, darling." Ellie intervened from the kitchen. She appeared with a cup of coffee in her hands and an inscrutable expression. "Julian, have you eaten?" "No, but I don't want to intrude." "You're not intruding," Ethan said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "In fact, I think it's time we had a civilized conversation, the three of us." During breakfast, while Charlie chattered about her school and her friends, the three adults maintained a superficial but courteous conversation. It was surreal, like a parody of a functional family. After Charlie finished her cereal, Ethan got up from the table. "Charlie, how about you spend the day with Daddy Julian today? I have to work at the hospital." "Really?" Charlie's eyes lit up. "All day?" Julian looked at Ellie for confirmation. She nodded slowly. "But tomorrow," Ethan continued, "I'd like us to talk, the four of us, like adults." "The four of us?" Julian asked. You, me, Ellie, and Charlie, because she also has a voice in this." After Ethan left, Julian was alone with Ellie for the first time since the night before. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" he asked. "I'm not sure of anything, Julian. But Charlie deserves to know her father, and you deserve the opportunity to know her. And us? Do we deserve a second chance?" Ellie avoided his gaze. "This isn't about us. It's about her." But when Julian gently took her hand, Ellie didn't pull away. "Can you honestly tell me you feel nothing? That these 4 years erased everything we had? What we had broke when you left without explanation. What if I could explain everything? If you could understand why I had to leave?" Before Ellie could respond, Charlie appeared running with her coat in her hands. "I'm ready for the park!" The day at Regent's Park was a revelation for Julian. He discovered his daughter was extroverted like Ellie, but also had his tendency towards silent observation. She liked bright colors, hated loud noises, and had a laugh so contagious that several strangers smiled just hearing it. When they returned to the apartment at sunset, they found Ellie working in her study. Papers were scattered across the table, and there was a look of worry on her face. "What's wrong?" Julian asked. "Nothing. Just work." But her voice sounded strained. Charlie approached her mother and saw the papers. "Mummy, why are there red numbers on these bills?" Julian approached and saw the outstanding accounts. "Electricity, water, the apartment rent, all with red overdue stamps," Ellie murmured. "How long have you been like this?" She turned to him with wounded pride in her eyes. "It's none of your business." "Yes, it is." "Charlie is my daughter, and what are you going to do? Take out your checkbook and solve everything with money? Just like you solved our marital problems by disappearing?" But Julian had seen something else among the papers. A letter from the bank. A repossession notice. Ellie was about to lose the apartment where she lived with her daughter, and judging by the date on the letter, she had less than a week to come up with the money. And looking at Ellie and Ethan, he realized this was going to be much more complicated than he had imagined. Julian left the apartment with the image of the overdue bills burned into his mind. As he walked through the streets of Notting Hill, he pulled out his phone and dialed the number of his assistant in New York. "David, I need you to transfer £50,000 to a Spanish account. I'll send you the details in 5 minutes." But before hanging up, he paused. Did he really think he could solve everything with money? That he could buy his way back into Ellie and Charlie's lives? He hung up without completing the transfer. The next morning, he arrived at the apartment early. Maria opened the door with a worried expression. "Mr. Julian, thank goodness you're here. Mrs. Hayes has been very nervous since last night, and Charlie has noticed. Is Ethan here?" "Yes, he arrived half an hour ago. They're talking in the kitchen." Julian headed that way and found Ethan sitting across from Ellie, with several papers spread on the table. "I've calculated everything," Ethan was saying. "If we sell my car and take out a loan against my apartment, we can get half the money you need. Ethan, I can't let you do that." "Why not? We're getting married. Your problems are my problems." "Precisely why I can't accept it. It's not fair to start a marriage burdening you with my debts." Julian coughed softly to announce his presence. Both turned to him. "How much do you need?" he asked directly. "Julian, I already told you that." £40,000, Ethan answered for her. "Between the overdue rent, the expired bills, and Charlie's school fees." Julian nodded. It was an insignificant amount to him, but he understood it represented a world to Ellie. "I have a proposal," he said, sitting down with them. "But first, I need to tell you something, Ellie. Something I should have told you 4 years ago." Ellie looked at him distrustfully. There wasn't just a political scandal. There was something else. Julian breathed deeply. "My partner, Marcus Thorne, wasn't just embezzling company funds. He was also using our accounts to launder drug money. The silence was absolute. When I realized, it was already too late. The police were investigating. The media were sniffing around, and there were real threats against anyone associated with me." Julian looked directly at Ellie. "The night before I left, Marcus called me. He told me he knew where you worked, what time you left the studio, which route you took home." Ellie paled. Are you saying that if I hadn't fled, if I had stayed to fight like an honorable man, they would have used you as leverage against me, or worse?" Ethan ran a hand across his forehead. "My God. Marcus was arrested 3 months after my departure. He's serving 15 years in prison. But by then, I had already lost everything. The company, the accounts, my reputation, and you." Ellie had tears in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me then? Why didn't you explain?" "Because I thought you would be safer believing I was a coward than knowing the truth. Because I didn't want you to live in fear. But I lived with something worse than fear, Julian. I lived with the certainty that I had meant nothing to you." At that moment, Charlie appeared in the kitchen in her pajamas, her hair tousled. "Why is everyone crying?" The 3 adults looked at each other, not knowing how to explain the complexity of the situation. "We're talking about grown-up things, darling," Ellie said, quickly drying her tears. "Sometimes grown-up things are sad and happy at the same time," Julian replied, moving closer to her. "Like when Patches went to heaven, but then Mummy told me he could run without his paws hurting?" "Exactly like that." Charlie seemed satisfied with the explanation and naturally climbed onto Julian's lap. "Daddy, are we going to fly the kite today?" Julian looked at Ellie, then at Ethan. "First we have to sort some things out, little one, but I promise you we'll fly that kite." "Do you really promise? Not like fake promises?" The question pierced the hearts of the 3 adults present. "I promise you for real, Charlie. The most real promise I've ever made in my life." After Maria took Charlie to get dressed for school, Ellie looked at Julian with an expression that had completely changed. "Now I understand why you left," she murmured. "But that doesn't erase the pain of these 4 years. I know, and I want to make up for it." "How?" Julian breathed deeply. "I want you and Charlie to come with me to New York. I want to give you the job of a lifetime, designing the corporate image for my new renewable energy company. I want Charlie to grow up knowing her father, and I want—" He paused, looking at Ethan too. "I want to win you back the right way, without money, without shortcuts, just by being the man I should have been 4 years ago." Ethan slowly stood up from the table. "And what about me in that equation?" Julian looked at him with respect. "That's up to Ellie, but I'm going to fight for my family with every weapon I have. And this time, I'm not running away." Ellie remained motionless for several minutes after Julian finished speaking. The proposal floated in the air like a promise and a threat at the same time. New York, a new life, the opportunity to form the family she had always dreamed of, but also leaving behind everything she had built with so much effort. "I need time to think," she finally murmured. "How much time?" Julian asked. "I don't know. It's too big." Ethan, who had remained silent, approached Ellie and took her hands in his. "Ellie, look at me." She raised her gaze to his brown eyes, so different from Julian's green ones. "In these 2 years we've been together, have I done anything that wasn't for your happiness and Charlie's?" "No, never." "Then trust me now." Ethan breathed deeply. "Go with him." "What?" Ellie and Julian said in unison. "Go with him to New York. Give Charlie the chance to know her real father. Give the two of you the chance to find out if what you had can be rebuilt." "Ethan, you can't be serious." "I am completely serious." Ethan's eyes filled with tears that he refused to shed. "Do you know what my biggest fear has been these 2 years? It wasn't Julian coming back. It was that you would marry me without having completely moved on from your past with him." Ellie felt her heart break. "Ethan, I can't compete against a ghost, but I also can't live being the second option." Her voice cracked slightly. "If you come back from New York and decide you want to be with me, I'll know it's because you truly love me, not because I'm a safe choice." Julian watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and guilt. Ethan was being more noble than he would have been in his place. "And if she doesn't come back?" Julian asked quietly. Ethan looked him directly in the eyes. "Then it will mean she made the right decision, and I'll have to learn to live with that." At that moment, Charlie appeared running with her school backpack. "I'm ready. Maria says we'll be late if we don't go now." The 3 adults looked at her, aware that this little person was going to be the most affected by any decision they made. "Charlie," Ellie said, kneeling in front of her, "would you like to go on a trip with Daddy Julian?" "A trip? Like a holiday?" "A little longer than a holiday." Charlie's eyes lit up. "And are you coming with me, Mummy?" "Yes, I would go with you." "And Uncle Ethan?" The silence that followed was devastating. Charlie looked between the 3 adults, and her childish intelligence began to process what was happening. "Uncle Ethan is staying here, right?" "Yes, little one. But why can't he come with us? Airplanes fit lots of people." Ethan knelt beside Ellie. "Because sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions, Charlie. And my decision is to stay here and continue taking care of other children at the hospital. But will you miss me every day? And can I call you on the phone as many times as you want?" Charlie nodded solemnly. Then she approached Ethan and hugged him tightly. "Thank you for taking care of me when Daddy Julian wasn't here." Her daughter's words completely broke Ellie's defenses. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. "It's okay, Mummy," Charlie said, approaching to comfort her. "Sometimes it's okay to cry. You told me that when Patches died." That afternoon, after taking Charlie to school, the 3 of them sat in the park near the apartment to talk without the child present. "Are you sure about this, Ethan?" Ellie asked one last time. "I'm not sure about anything, but I know that if I don't let you go, I'll always wonder what would have happened if I had." Julian extended his hand to Ethan. "I promise I'll take good care of her, of both of them." Ethan shook his hand. "And I promise that if you don't take care of them the way they deserve, I'll fly to New York myself to bring them back. Deal." Ellie looked at both of them, aware that she had just witnessed one of the most generous acts of love she had ever seen. "Then it's decided," she murmured. "We're going to New York." But that night, as she was packing, her phone rang with a call that would change everything again. "Ellie Hayes, I'm Detective Miller from the London Police. We need to speak with you urgently about Julian Vance." Ellie felt the world collapsing around her. With trembling hands, she agreed to meet Detective Miller at a cafe near her apartment in 20 minutes. "What is it?" Julian appeared at her door just as she hung up the phone. "The police want to talk to me about you." Julian's face immediately tensed. "Ellie, listen to me carefully. Whatever they tell you, I need you to know that everything I told you is the truth." "Everything?" "You left out a few things, Julian. The police want to talk about your 4 years abroad. Was it just running away or something more?" 20 minutes later, Ellie was sitting across from Detective Miller, a man in his 50s with a serious but not hostile expression. "Mrs. Hayes, are you familiar with Mr. Vance's criminal background? I know he was involved in a financial scandal 4 years ago, but he was a victim of his partner." "That's correct. Marcus Thorne was convicted of money laundering and racketeering." The inspector took out a folder. "What you might not know is that Mr. Vance has been collaborating with Interpol for these 4 years. Ellie felt the air escape her lungs. Collaborating? Mr. Vance was the one who provided the crucial information that allowed us to dismantle Thorne's entire network. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the drug trafficking contacts, everything. But why are you telling me this? Because the operation has finally concluded. We arrested the last member of the organization yesterday. Mr. Vance no longer needs police protection, and all accusations against him have been officially dropped." Ellie remained silent, processing the information. "There's something else," the inspector continued. "Mr. Vance waived any right to recover Thorne's confiscated assets. Instead, he requested they be directed to a fund for victims of organized crime. We're talking about more than £10 million. Why would he do that? According to him, because his new money was built cleanly, and he didn't want anything tainted by the past." When Ellie returned to the apartment, she found Julian playing with Charlie on the living room floor. His daughter was laughing as he made funny voices with her dolls. "Daddy, are there parks in New York like here?" Charlie asked. "Yes, little one. There's a huge park called Central Park, where you can fly kites every day. And will there be other children to play with? Lots of children. And good schools and museums full of art that Mummy likes." When Julian saw Ellie in the doorway, his expression changed immediately. "What did they tell you?" Ellie slowly approached and sat on the floor with them. "That you're a hero?" she murmured. "That you've been risking your life for 4 years to make sure those criminals paid for what they did?" Julian looked away. "I'm no hero. I just did what I had to do." "Did you know you could have recovered millions of pounds? And what did I want them for? My clean money has given me everything I need." Charlie, oblivious to the adults' conversation, continued playing with her dolls. "Do you know what hurts the most?" Ellie finally said. "What?" "That you didn't trust me enough to tell me the complete truth. 4 years ago, and even now. Ellie, I was protecting you." "You weren't protecting me, Julian. You were underestimating me." Her eyes filled with tears. "Did you think I wouldn't have been strong enough to stand by you through all of this? That I wouldn't have been able to keep a secret? To live with fear if it meant being together?" Julian was speechless. "Mummy, why are you crying again?" Charlie asked, approaching her with concern. "Because sometimes daddies and mummies have to learn to be better for each other, darling. And have you learned?" Ellie looked Julian directly in the eyes. "I don't know. Have you learned, Julian?" Julian took Ellie's hands in his. "Yes. I learned that true love isn't protecting someone by keeping them in ignorance. It's trusting that person is strong enough to face the truth with you. And can you promise me you'll never again make decisions for us without consulting us?" "I promise." "A real promise or a fake promise?" Charlie asked, remembering their earlier conversation. Julian smiled with tears in his eyes. "A real promise, little one. The truest promise I've ever made in my life." Ellie closed her eyes. She breathed deeply, and she made the decision that would change their lives forever. Okay, we're going to New York. But this time we're going as a real family, with all the truths, all the fears, and all the hopes on the table. Julian kissed her softly, while Charlie clapped without fully understanding the historic moment she had just witnessed. For the first time in 4 years, Julian Vance felt like he had come home. Meaningful ending. A family of conscious choices. 2 years later, Central Park, New York. The autumn sun filtered through the golden leaves of the trees as Charlotte ran across the grass of Central Park, chasing a red butterfly-shaped kite that danced in the wind. Her laughter filled the air as Julian ran behind her, pretending he couldn't catch her. "Faster, Daddy! The kite is going to escape!" At 5 years old, Charlie had grown into a confident, perfectly bilingual child who moved between two worlds with the naturalness only children possess. She spoke English with her classmates at the International School of Manhattan, but still told her secrets to her parents in Spanish. Ellie watched the scene from a blanket spread on the grass, a warm smile on her face, as she reviewed the print proofs for her latest project, the visual campaign for the new European division of Vance Clean Energy. In 2 years, her work had been recognized with 3 international design awards, and her studio in Tribeca had become one of the most sought after in New York. "Do you remember when you thought you'd never get that kite to fly?" a familiar voice said behind her. Ellie turned to find Ethan smiling, dressed in an elegant coat and carrying a small travel suitcase. "Uncle Ethan!" Charlie immediately abandoned the kite and ran to hug him. "My favorite girl. How's the prettiest New Yorker in the world? I lost 2 teeth. Look!" Charlie proudly showed him the gap in her smile. "And the tooth fairy left me $5. She's called the Raton Perez back home, but I still call her that because I like it more." Ethan had kept his promise to visit them every 6 months. On those visits, he had met Dr. Rebecca Klein, a Canadian pediatrician who worked at the same hospital as him in London. They had married the previous year in a small, intimate ceremony that Julian, Ellie, and Charlie had specially flown from New York to attend. "How's Rebecca?" Ellie asked, hugging him with the genuine affection that had grown between them. "Pregnant," Ethan announced with a radiant smile. 3 months along. "Ethan, what wonderful news." Julian approached and shook Ethan's hand with the camaraderie he had developed with the man who was once his rival. "Congratulations. You're going to be an incredible father." "I've had a good teacher," Ethan said, ruffling Charlie's hair. "This little one taught me everything I know about being a dad." During the picnic, while Charlie told Ethan about her new school, her ballet classes, and her recent obsession with dinosaurs, Ellie observed her extended family. It wasn't the traditional family she had imagined as a girl, but it was perfect in its imperfection. Julian had kept all his promises. Not just the big ones, like moving his company to New York to be close to them, or involving Ellie in all the important decisions of their lives. Also the small ones. Being present at every school recital, every night terror, every ordinary moment that makes a family real. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked her, sitting next to her while Ethan and Charlie built a castle of dry leaves. "That 2 years ago I thought I knew the end of our story. And now I realize we were barely writing the first chapter." Julian took her hand, the engagement ring he had given her 6 months ago, shining under the autumn sun. The wedding was scheduled for the following spring, in a ceremony in London, which would be attended by both her new New York life and her Spanish roots. "Do you know what I love most about our ending?" Julian murmured. "What?" "That it's not an ending. It's a beginning." Charlie ran over, her cheeks rosy from the cold and leaves in her hair. "Daddy, Mommy, Uncle Ethan says his baby is going to be my cousin. Is that true?" "It's true, darling." "Perfect. Then I can teach him to fly kites when he comes to visit us." As they walked back toward their apartment on the Upper East Side, Julian carrying Charlie on his shoulders, and Ellie walking alongside Ethan, they all knew they had achieved something extraordinary. They had built a family not only of blood, but of conscious choices, mutual forgiveness, and love that had survived distance, time, and the wounds of the past. That night, after putting Charlie to bed and seeing Ethan off at the airport, Ellie and Julian sat on their terrace overlooking Central Park. "Do you ever regret it?" Ellie asked. "Regret what?" "All the decisions we made to get here. The mistakes, the pain, even the lost time." Julian looked at her with those green eyes that Charlie had inherited. "I don't regret anything, because everything, absolutely everything, led us to this moment." Ellie smiled, snuggling into his arms as the lights of New York flickered like terrestrial stars before them. Sometimes, true love isn't finding the perfect person. It's learning to build a perfect life with the imperfect person you choose to love every day, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Interactive questions and final CTA. Would you have been able to forgive an abandonment if you had known the real reasons? Or would the lie have been too much? Do you think love can truly survive 4 years of separation and pain? Thank you for watching. If you liked the story, subscribe to our channel and leave a comment telling us what you thought. Your comments and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.